Spanish Obsessed, Spanish from Scratch, number 8. Hola Liz, ¿qué tal?
Bien, 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 Rob. ¿Qué estás haciendo?
Pues no mucho. Estamos grabando un podcast.
Este es el tema de hoy.
Yes, today we're going to talk about doing things. So we're going to move on to talking about action type sentences. We're going to look at how you can say you're doing something, which is known as the continuous or progressive tense. And in English, this is the ing ending, and that's what makes this tense continuous. So notice that in the phrase I'm running or he was running, the ing ending adds a sense of process and continuity to the meaning. Spanish uses something like this as well, and that's what we're looking at today. Before we start, however, now is a good time to review the verbs. If you haven't done your homework, now is a good time to go and do it. So we've covered around about 40 verbs so far in our podcast. So if you don't know these very well, now's a good time to go and spend a few minutes just reviewing those. There's a complete list on the notes to this podcast, so download those and come back in a little while when you've got those. Great, now you've memorized those, we're ready to start. So just as in English, we add the ending ing to give a sense of process or continuity. Spanish has a similar ending as well. Now remember, there are 3 verb endings in Spanish. What are they, Liz?
Are, and ir.
Yeah, so AR, ER, and IR verb endings. Now to make the progressive ending in Spanish, we need to take the root of the verb. So remember, the root is what's left of the verb once you've removed either the AR, ER, or IR, and then we need to add whatever ending we need. So in this case, we add the continuous ending, which for AR verbs is ando, and for ER and IR verbs sounds like yendo. So we'll take a couple of examples. Can you remember the verb to speak? How do you say to speak?
Hablar.
Hablar. Okay, so to find out the root, we take off the ending. So AR is the ending, so we're left with habl. And then we add our progressive ending. So what do you get?
Hablando.
Hablando. Great, so that's an AR verb. Let's look at an IR verb. Can you remember the verb to write?
Escribir.
So, how do we get from to write to writing?
Escribiendo.
Escrib is the root, and we add the ending yendo, so escribiendo. And we're going to teach you a new verb as well, which is to meet or to know someone, which is conocer. This is an ER verb. So how do you get from to know to knowing?
Conociendo.
So, as always, there are a few exceptions to the above, where we use slightly different spellings. But we're not going to worry too much about those right now. Instead, we'll give you one principle which you can use to help you remember the vast number of spelling exceptions that Spanish seems to have. And that is that Spanish spelling follows spoken Spanish. Spoken Spanish came first, and then the spelling was made to fit how the language is spoken, not the other way round. So spoken first and then written. So all of the written Spanish rules are actually based on how the language sounds. So worry more about the sounds you're making than the letters you're writing. In the case of progressive verbs, which is what we're looking at today, it's easy to remember the sound that you need to add rather than the spelling. That's why we said ando and yendo. Those are the only 2 things you need to remember. But in Spanish, yendo can be spelt in different ways. Can you remember the verb to hear?
Oír.
Okay, so let's try and get from to hear to the progressive form hearing. We add the sound yendo. So we take the root, and to get the root, we remove the IR ending. So oír is actually only 3 letters. O-I-R. So we're left with O. And we add the ending yendo. So we get
oyendo,
oyendo. And the spelling reflects this. It's spelt O-Y-E-N-D-O, not O-I-E-N-D-O. So let's practice. We'll give you the complete verb in the infinitive, and you conjugate it into progressive form, which is also known as the gerund. Number 1.
andar, andando,
Easy so far. So we remove the ending AR, and we're left with and we add the ending ando, andando. Number 2.
hablar, hablando,
Exactly the same as before. How about number 3?
vivir, viviendo,
So vivir, which means to live. And to get the root, we remove the last 2 letters, which is IR, and we're left with viv, or biv, or bib, sorry. It's pronounced, the V is pronounced like a kind of B sound. So bib, and we add the ending yendo, viviendo,
viviendo,
viviendo. Yeah, it's quite a funny sound, that, the V sound. It's kind of halfway between our English B and V. So if you imagine the form that your lips take when you pronounce a B, that's both lips together, and a V, which is when your top teeth go against your bottom lip, it's kind of in between that. Hard to describe. It's kind of a very soft B sound. Viviendo. Say it again.
viviendo,
Okay, next verb.
comer, comiendo,
Okay, so to get to the root, we remove the ER and we're left with com, and we add the ending yendo, comiendo.
leer, leyendo.
Okay, leer, meaning to read. What?
¿Se again?
Leer.
Leer,
Leer. Leer.
no leyer.
Okay, leer, which means to read, is spelt L-E-E-R. So it looks like in English, leer. Don't pronounce it like that. It's leer. So to get to the root, we follow exactly the same principles as before. We remove the ending. So we remove ER ending. We're left with le. And we add yendo, and we get leyendo.
Hacer, haciendo,
Hacer, or hacer, if you're Spanish or in Spain, means to do or to make. It's probably one of the most common verbs in Spanish. And we follow exactly the same principles here. We remove the last 2 letters to get the root. So from hacer to as. And we add yendo, haciendo, or haciendo. And finally,
ir, yendo,
okay, ir means to go. And this is a funny verb, because to get to the root, you have to remove the ending. However, there's only 2 letters in ir, IR. So if we remove those, what are we left with? Well, nothing. But that's the rule we follow anyway. So we remove the ending, we're left with nothing, and we add yendo. So we go from ir to yendo. Do you remember our English example sentence? I'm running. So the running, the gerund, is only one part of this. In this sentence, there's actually 2 verbs, as well as the pronoun I. So the full sentence is I am running. So am comes from the verb to be. Now in Spanish, we need to do this as well. We need to add the verb be. And in the progressive tense, we use estar, which is our old friend from the previous podcast, of course. We conjugate the verb estar, and we add the progressive verb after that. So listen to these examples and see if you can guess what they mean.
Estoy comiendo.
I am eating.
Él está corriendo.
He is running.
Están hablando en español.
They are talking in Spanish.
Estoy leyendo un libro.
I'm reading a book.
Estamos jugando fútbol.
We're playing football. Okay, now we're going to up it one more level. We're going to do a little mini dialogue, Liz and I, and this is a little more complex, so you might need to rewind and listen a couple of times. We'd like you to listen and try and follow what we're saying.
Hola Rob, ¿qué estás haciendo?
Hola Liz, ¿qué más? Estoy tomando un café y estoy leyendo mi libro. ¿Y tú? ¿Qué estás haciendo ahora? ¿Estás leyendo también?
No, no estoy leyendo. Estoy pensando en ti.
¡Qué bonito!
Y también trabajando.
Pero, ¿qué están haciendo nuestros amigos?
No sé, creo que están en Londres. Me imagino que están bebiendo en un bar.
Sí, yo me imagino. Bueno, hasta luego.
Bueno, adiós.
Okay, so that was a little tricky. We're trying to push the boat out here. We threw in a couple of extra phrases in there we haven't met before. So if you got lost at all, check out the transcription and there's also a full translation there. Notice that to make the negative with progressive verbs is extremely simple. All you need to do is add a no before the verb estar. So Liz, how do you say we are reading?
Estamos leyendo.
So how would you say we are not reading?
No, estamos leyendo.
Okay, and now it's your turn. See if you can translate the following phrases into Spanish. Remember, we need to use estar, which is conjugated in the right form, and the verb in the progressive form follows it. I'm walking.
Estoy caminando.
She's running.
Ella está corriendo.
We're living in London.
Nosotros estamos viviendo en Londres.
We're not drinking coffee. We want beer.
Nosotros no estamos tomando café. Nosotros queremos cerveza. Nosotros no estamos tomando café. Nosotros queremos cerveza.
What are you doing?
¿Qué estás haciendo?
I'm running to the bar.
Estoy corriendo al bar.
I'm drinking beer in the bar.
Estoy tomando una cerveza en el bar.
I'm sleeping in the bar.
Estoy durmiendo en el bar.
So, there's a first look at the progressive verbs. There are a few other bits and pieces to bear in mind, but we'll take a look at those a little later in this series. I think we've overloaded you a little bit too much today already, so that's enough to be getting on with. So, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. From me, Rob, adios, and from Liz,
Hasta pronto.
don't forget you can download the transcription and all the notes to this podcast and all others on SpanishObsessed.com. And if you're listening on iTunes, we would really appreciate a review. If you've enjoyed it or if you found it useful, if you've learned something, then please give us a review.